Finally, we have just one more team, Team SeaEco, and they will talk about performance standard for scrubber, which is very exciting subject because IMO 2020 sulfur is main headache these days for ship owners. So I am very excited. Please start.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Team SeaEco. We have prepared one of the IMO's future strategy of SD3, Respond to Climate Change. The title of this presentation is Performance Standard for Scrubber. The presentation is composed of 4 parts. Firstly, IMO Regulation 2020, implications, performance standard for scrubber, and lastly, action requested of the Assembly. I, as the first presenter, will be discussing about the background of the IMO regulation and the 4 ways to meet 2020 sulfur cap requirements. IMO has been working to reduce harmful impacts of shipping on the environment since the 1960s. Annex 6 to the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, known as the MARPOL Convention, was adopted in 1997 to address air pollution from shipping. Annex 6 entered into force on 19 May 2005. Here, there were 6 requirements for control of emissions from ships, which were ozone-depleting substance, nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides and particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, shipboard incineration, and lastly, carbon dioxide, which has entered into force on 1st January 2013. But as our main topic, we are going to discuss about one of the 6 requirements, sulfur oxides. IMO regulations to reduce sulfur oxides emissions from ships first came into force in 2005 under Annex 6 of the MARPOL Convention. Since then, the limits on sulfur oxides have been progressively tightened. From 1st January 2020, the MARPOL Annex 6 regulation on limiting sulfur content of bunker fuel to a maximum of 0.5% will enter into force. At present, the global sulfur content on bunker fuel is at 3.5%, a level considered easy to comply with for vessel operators. If you look at the background of the limit of sulfur oxides on fuel oil, as shown in the table, globally, it has reduced from 4.5% mass by mass to 0.5% mass by mass. Additionally, the SOx emission limits have been reduced to 0.1% from 1.5% in Baltic and North Sea and 4.5% in North American ECA, effective on 1st January 2015. The main type of bunker oil for ships is heavy fuel oil, derived as a residue from crude oil distillation. Crude oil contains sulfur, which following combustion in the engine ends up in ship emissions. Sulfur oxides are known to be harmful to human health and to the atmosphere. Limiting sulfur oxides emissions from ships will improve air quality, which will improve in human health and protect the environment. So, how can ships comply? There are 4 ways to meet the IMO 2020 sulfur cap requirements. First, use a compliant fuel oil. Second, use an alternative fuel like LNG and methanol. Third, use onshore power supply when at berth. And lastly, install a scrubber. Owners can use a compliant fuel oil. Ships can make the switch from high sulfur fuel oil to marine gas oil. This is actually the easiest and quickest solution, but will likely lead to a marine gas oil shortage if most carriers choose this option. And also, marine gas oil is approximately 50% more expensive than high sulfur fuel oil. Moreover, owners can use an alternative fuel. Fuel cell engines for ships are under development, but it will take time to reach a level of maturity sufficient for substituting main engines. In addition, studies show that onshore power supply reduces the emissions of SOx by 80%, NOx and PM by almost 100%. But not all vessels are equipped with onshore power supply connection, and installing OPS connection is expensive for both ships and ports alike. Owners can choose the above 3 options to comply. However, none of these 3 options are as reasonable as installing a scrubber when it comes to complying with the IMO SOx regulation. Scrubbers Scrubbers can significantly mitigate the cost impact from the 2020 sulfur cap when compared to the switch to other available solutions, which are much more expensive. Also, vessels can continue using high sulfur fuel oil as scrubbers clean their exhaust gas. As so, by the end of 2019, according to the statistics, 2,950 vessels are expected to have installed scrubbers. By 2023, the number expected to have risen to 3,500. As many companies have opted for scrubbers, it may be in everyone's best interest to use a scrubber. The next speaker will be discussing about the scrubber systems.
Thank you. Even though the scrubber is the most reasonable solution to the 2020 IMO SOx regulation, there are some scrubber systems that we should get through. I will present the topic into two main categories, open loop type scrubber and closed loop type scrubber. And I will present the advantages and disadvantages of open loop type scrubbers and closed loop type scrubbers. To begin, what is open loop type and closed loop type scrubber? Open loop type scrubbers generally use seawater as the scrubbing liquid. Once the scrubbing process has been completed, the wash water is filtered and separated accordingly and discharged overboard. Closed loop type scrubbers generally use chemically controlled sea or fresh water as the scrubbing liquid. It recirculates the scrubbing liquid with only a small bleed off discharged overboard. Once passed through the exhaust gas, the wash water is typically held in a process tank, treated, and then recirculated. There are some advantages of open loop type scrubbers. Firstly, simplicity. Seawater is simply pumped through the system, filtered, and discharged back overboard. Secondly, there is no need for additional chemicals to ensure their efficacy. Also, there are some disadvantages of open loop type scrubbers. Firstly, open loop type scrubbers generally potentially hazardous to marine life, since the sulfur is dissolved in the wash water and discharged into the sea. Secondly, open loop type scrubbers may cause system wear and fouling, since due to the continuous intake of seawater, which contains sand or other sediments, which could lead to a smaller filter meshes installed in sea strainers. And lastly, there's a problem of acceptability of open loop type scrubbers in various port states. Their acceptance for use in port is a subject that is continuing to be hotly debated within the industry, and we will discuss about this more. There are advantages of closed loop type scrubbers as well. Firstly, closed loop type scrubbers, by virtue of their chemical dosing, the alkalinity of the scrubbing water can be controlled. Secondly, there are less contained sulfur in the wash water. With existing wash water being recirculated, closed loop type scrubbers generally require 50% of water volume compared to open loop type scrubbers. And lastly, closed loop type scrubbers are immune to fouling caused by intake of sand or sedimentation due to said recirculation of the wash water. And there are also disadvantages of closed loop type scrubbers. Firstly, closed loop type scrubbers are more complex with more required storage tanks as well as additional water treatment equipment. And secondly, closed loop type scrubbers require chemical handling and storage. Vessel crews will be required to become familiar with the chemical storage and handling requirements to ensure safe operation and maintenance. And the next speaker will give presentations, the performance standard for scrubber, which is our main topic.
Thank you. Thank you. So what we need to focus on is that some countries do not allow the discharge of wastewater from the open loop scrubbers. As the number of ports prohibiting the usage of scrubbers on open loop scrubbers in their ports, the shipping industries are becoming more confused. For instance, the Singapore port, which has been the world's largest port last year, announced the ban on the open loop scrubbers in their waters, in their ports, effective on January 2020. And this was what was actually caused the industry wave. And other than that, apart from Singapore, there are about 10 different countries that are prohibiting the use of open loop scrubbers in their ports. Since the IMO 2020 regulations only regulate the sulfur content of in the exhaust gas, it does not matter which method you use to meet the regulations. However, individual regulation in some countries such as Singapore, this situation does matter because it is actually contrary to the principle that all countries should meet the IMO regulations as an universal implementation. The IMO's 2020 SOx regulation states that the emission of SOx substances must be below 0.5%, regardless of whether they are equipped with an open or closed loop scrubber, which implies that if the discharging water from the scrubbers contains less than 0.5% of SOx, it is in compliance with the regulations. And we believe that if the IMO provides a common performance standard for all types of scrubbers, internationally harmonized implementation can be achieved. And just now we have explained the advantages and the disadvantages of each scrubber systems. But there now, this brings us down to the biggest issue of all, which is that the IMO has yet to specify on the details of the performance standards of the scrubber systems. This is what we think of the performance standards of the scrubber systems. We invite the IMO to regulate the following measures. Number one, the sulfur contents in the discharged wash water, regardless of whether the scrubber adopts an open or closed loop system. Number two, limiting the followings in the discharged wash water, such as SOx, particulate matter, sand, and sediments. By doing so, we will be able to eliminate the ambiguity of vessels being denied port entry because of the type of the scrubbers that they are equipped with. This brings us down to our final point of the presentation, actions requested of the Assembly. The Assembly is invited to take note of the need for internationally harmonized performance standards of the scrubber. The Assembly is invited to consider and adopt a draft Assembly resolutions as set out in the annex that we have prepared for you. The scrubber shall be designed so as not to endanger the health and safety of the crew, interact negatively with the ship's systems and cargo, or produce any adverse environmental effects. The scrubber should be provided with simple and effective means for its operation and control. It should be provided with a control system that should be such that the services needed for the proper operation of the scrubber are ensured through the necessary arrangements. The scrubber shall incorporate control equipment that automatically monitors and detects the impurities of discharged wash water of the scrubbers. The discharge of wash water from the SOx scrubber must meet the limitations of the following: sulfur content of less than 0.5%, particulate matter emissions level less than 1.5 micrograms per cubic meter air per day. The scrubber shall be equipped with an appropriate filter so as the sand and sediments drawn from the wash water does not affect the operation of the scrubber as set by the manufacturer. Facilities should be provided for checking at the renewal surveys and according to the manufacturer's instructions, the performance of the scrubber components that take measurements. A calibration certificate certifying the date of the last calibration check should be retained on board for inspection purposes. Only the manufacturer or persons authorized by the manufacturer should perform the accuracy checks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, SeaEco. I thought you looks like a lawyer, isn't he? Stating a lot of things very formally. So if you have any questions, please ask. Yes, from Judge.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused because as long as I understand, the MEPC 59, at that session, the committee adopted the relevant IMO guidelines, providing some technical specification of the EGCS scrubber unit for industry. So now, our related stakeholders are deeply considering the installation of that system, and the manufacturers are designing the system, and the government and classification societies certifying the system, and the shipbuilders and ship owners install and will use the system accordingly, in accordance with IMO guideline already adopted. So, my question is, even though the IMO already provide the appropriate guidelines on that, why you present a specifically proposed new draft assembly resolution providing another technical specification on the system?
Thank you for your question. We'll be right back with you. Thank you for waiting for us. So what we're proposing is, our issue is that our proposal is on the issue of the discharged wash water, which contains the, once the SOx substances get into touch with water, it becomes sulfuric acid, and that's what we're mainly focusing on. From what we believe and to our knowledge, the IMO has yet to specify on the details of the discharged components, the discharge contents of the open loop, from the open loop scrubbers.
Okay, thank you for your answer. But you mean, apart from the already adopted IMO guidelines, you just raised concerns on the discharge wash water quality issues in relation to the open loop scrubbers or the closed loop scrubbers in the future?
Yes, sir. It's because the countries are starting to ban the open loop scrubbers in their ports because they believe that the discharged wash water from the open loop scrubbers specifically are hazardous to the marine environment. And there are further studies that are actually against this idea. But if you would like to know more, if you'd like to know more about what we have prepared for you, you could ask a follow-up question. But as of now, our focus is on the discharge of the wash water from the open loop scrubbers.
Okay, thank you.
Let me take the question from students first, and then I will get back to you. Ocean 3.
Thank you. This is Ho-Jun Zhang from Oceans 3. First, thank you for the great presentation. Our question is this. Your proposition contains the technology of controlling the content of discharging water, right? Now, our question is, can you please explain the technical feasibility of that? Because we believe that, according to your presentation, countries like Singapore and other countries are banning the discharging of water in their territories for a reason. We think that if the technology that you are talking about exists already, then it already would have happened.
Thank you very much for your question. We're actually able to further clarify our situation through your inquiry. I believe such technology exists. There are some technologies on board already, such as the oil discharge monitoring equipment. Whenever you there is a law when you discharge oily water, you have to go through some equipment and make sure that the water is clean enough to discharge. I hope I'm answering your question correctly.
Okay, another question. The sheriff, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your informative presentation. My question is, you have talked about the advantages and disadvantages of the scrubber. When it comes to the IMO 2020 sulfur regulations, why do you think that the scrubber system is the most effective method when meeting the new regulations?
Thank you for your question. We have mentioned that there are actually 4 solutions you can meet to comply with the new upcoming requirements. One is the onshore power supply. Onshore power supply have been studied to reduce SOx emissions by almost 80% while you're in port. But the onshore power supply actually takes time, and This is, I'm sorry if this sounds kind of informal, but the ports and the ships are in some sort of a chicken game. Not many ports do not, most ports do not have onshore power supply connections installed, and also the same goes to the ships. The ships do not have the onshore power supply connections installed. And it takes time and investments to prepare the onshore power supply connections to both parties. And one party will not install them unless the other party installs them first. And we can move on to clean fuel, marine gas oil. Marine gas oil is apparently it's about 50% more expensive than the high sulfur fuel oil that we have talked about. And I believe it's up to every shipping company's best interest to save costs when you can. And we can move on to the LNG and methanol fuel. They are fuel cells, but those kinds of cells, those kinds of engines they haven't reached a level of maturity as of quite yet to fully replace the conventional engine, the conventional main engines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The last question is from the judge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. And I think this issue is a recently emerging issue, especially the shipping company has many concerns on the banning the discharging of the wash waters into the ship. As I mentioned my colleague before, this issue was decided to conduct scientific research to the harmfulness of the wash waters to the marine ecosystem. And my question is, how do you think about these waters or harmfulness to the marine ecosystem?
Thank you for your question. We believe that Japan has conducted a studies on whether the discharge of the scrubbing liquid is actually harmful to the environment. And I gotta be honest with you, I cannot be very certain on the exact details, but we found out that in the study's conclusion, in the long run, in the long process, this the scrubbing liquid is not as harmful as one may think. And I hope that answers your question, sir.
Yes, so I think it's better to finish now because we have just 1 minute. So thank you very much. SeaEco, you can return to your seat.